everybody. I am so excited to be here with all of you today. Welcome to the second installment of stop motion animation with your family from your own home. Welcome. Great. So for those of you who were not here last week, my name is Bridget. I am a filmmaker and animator in New York City, and I am so excited to be teaching you all about stop motion animation, which is a very, very special kind of animation that is really easy to do from your own home. It's easy to do with materials just from around your house. You don't need anything very special. You can just create an animation from home, which is really exciting. Last week, we were able to learn kind of the basics of stop motion animating, learn a little bit about the history of what it is, and then we also learned how to create an animation station using things like books and boxes and rulers. So if you were not able to attend last week, you can go ahead and watch the video online, and then you'll be able to set up your own animation station from home, which is really exciting. Today's class, we are going to take the next step in animation, and we are going to learn how to write a story for a short film. We're going to learn how to design a character for your short film. And then we are going to learn something very special called storyboarding. Storyboarding is kind of the roadmap that an animator needs to create their film. So we're going to pack all of that into this short class. So I hope you're all ready and excited to learn. Basically, the way it's going to work today is I'm going to show you all a short stop motion animation film, and we're going to use that throughout the rest of the class. So I'm just going to make sure that everybody is here, that we're good. I notice we have, I think, enough participants. I think we're good. Okay, great. So the film I'm about to show you is called Fluffy McCloud. It's one of my very favorite films, and it's created by a man named Colin Finnegan. It was produced by Disney, and it's really great. It's only 2.5 minutes long. So while you're watching, I'd like you all to be thinking about what is the beginning, the middle, and the end of this film. So really be thinking about that as we watch it. And Anastasia, I'm ready for you to play it. amazing. What did you guys think of that? If you liked it, you can go ahead and put in the chat maybe some of your feelings, how you felt about it. That is one of my very, very favorite stop motion animations to show people, because there's no dialogue, right? There's nobody says anything, and yet you really understand what all of the characters are feeling. You really understand how the story is created. And so I think it just goes to show that with just a few simple animations and story techniques, you can make a whole film without dialogue, which is really exciting. So we're going to learn 3 different steps to story making today. The very first step I like to call character design. I want everybody to think a little bit. What do you think character design means? So character design is really just deciding who is our main character, what are they like, and what do they want? So I asked you all to bring with you a few pieces of paper and a writing utensil, and that's really all we need today. So on one of your very first pieces of paper, I'm going to draw Fluffy McCloud. This is my beautiful drawing of Fluffy McCloud. It doesn't have to be very great. And I want us all to think, who is Fluffy McCloud? What is he like? If you have any ideas, go ahead and throw them in the chat. I think one thing I know about Fluffy McCloud is that he's really nice, right? So I'm going to write nice. Something else I notice about Fluffy McCloud is that he's a helper. He helps people. I'm going to write helper. Something else that I noticed about Fluffy McCloud is that he reacts to his emotions. When he's really sad, he rains. When he's really mad, he accidentally lightnings. So he really acts on his emotions. Acts on emotions. And I'm also going to say he's a cloud. Because Fluffy McCloud is a cloud. So think about this. When you are creating your own character, I think it's really helpful to draw your character. Even if you aren't the best cloud drawer in the world, such as myself. I think it's really important that you draw it so you can visualize this character that you're putting personality into. The next thing I want to think about with this character is, what does Fluffy McCloud want? What does he want through this whole film? What does he want? When you make your own character at home, I want you to put this question really big. What does my character want? Sometimes your character might want a friend. Sometimes they might want to find treasure. Sometimes they might want to make their community a better place. I think Fluffy McCloud wants to help others. Wants to help others. So as we go through this story, I don't want us to ever forget that. We can't ever forget who our character, Fluffy McCloud, is. We always have to remember that Fluffy is nice, that Fluffy acts on his emotions, that Fluffy is a cloud, that Fluffy is a helper, and that the thing that Fluffy wants most is to help others. We have to remember this as we go through our story. So you can go ahead and set your character design aside. And with your next piece of paper, and you all will get to do this at home, I want you to take your piece of paper and I want you to fold it into thirds. Folding into third is very easy. You kind of roll it up like this. So you make kind of a burrito. And then you fold or you crease the edges. And now you have 3 perfect sections. Once you've done this, go ahead and define the sections with a marker or a writing utensil so that we're very sure what our 3 sections are. And then, as I'm sure you've guessed, we are going to write on the top of each of these sections, we're going to write beginning, middle, and end. Beginning, middle, end. Now this organizer is to help us list all of the events that happened in Fluffy McCloud's journey. And when you are writing your own story, I want you to think of everything that happens. What's at the beginning, what's at the end? So I hope that you all thought a little bit about this while you were watching Fluffy McCloud. And let's start here. What happened at the very, very beginning of this film? I want you to think about this. Think on your head. What happened at the beginning of the film? So the very first thing that happened was we met Fluffy, right? He entered the scene. Some music played. So I'm going to say the very first thing that happened, we meet Fluffy. And then what happened? Fluffy noticed that some flowers were dying. And he kind of discovered that if he rained on the flowers, they would come to life. So Fluffy, I'm going to say, helps the flowers. And then he notices a fish, right? So he helps the flowers and then he helps the fish. So what does this tell us about the story? This is the very beginning. We meet Fluffy. Fluffy discovers that he can help people, and he starts helping. So in the beginning of your story, no matter what story you are telling, the very first thing that needs to happen, number 1, is we have to meet your character. We have to learn about your character. So the very first thing that happens in any movie is we meet your main character. And the second thing that happens, this is when Fluffy is helping the flowers, helping the fish. The next thing that has to happen in the beginning is our main character has to set off on a journey. Whatever that journey is. Maybe that journey is finding their way back home. Maybe that journey is finding some buried treasure. Maybe that journey is finding a friend. For Fluffy McCloud, what was his journey that he kind of set out on? And let's not forget, what does he want? So Fluffy McCloud's journey is to go around town helping people, right? That's his journey. So remember, in the beginning, we meet our character and they're set off on a journey. So then what happened in the middle? What happens next? Fluffy McCloud rains on the wrong person, right? He rains on the man who is sunbathing. I'm going to say sunbathing man. What happens? It's a little scary, right? So he rains on this sunbathing man, and the man doesn't like it. He gets mad. He throws something at Fluffy, and then Fluffy accidentally sets his whole house on fire. So I'm going to write Fluffy sets house on fire. And I have to say that is my very, very favorite scene, when it's one flame and then it doubles and then it triples and then all of a sudden the whole screen is filled with a lot of different flames. If you think about that from an animator's perspective, it probably didn't take very long to animate, and yet it had such a big impact, right? They just had to animate a few little flames, but when they put them all next to each other the way they did, it felt scary. It felt like everything's really on fire. So that's one of my favorite scenes. So what does this tell us about what the middle should be? What should the middle of a story be? So in the middle of the story, our character confronts a conflict or an obstacle, right? Something is in the way of our main character finishing their journey. Right? Because Fluffy McCloud can't help people if everything's on fire. Fluffy McCloud can't help people when he's acting out of anger. I think that's kind of what we discover is Fluffy is on this journey to help people, but all of a sudden he does something that's not helpful. In fact, he does something that makes somebody else so mad. And so in the beginning, we meet our character and they set off on a journey. In the middle, they confront an obstacle that stops them from completing their journey. So what do you think the end is? Let's think about it. What happens in Fluffy McCloud? Remember, Fluffy was helping people, and then he helped the wrong person and set everything on fire. And then what happened? So the very last thing that happens is Fluffy figures out how to put the fire out, right? Fluffy puts out fire. I want us to think, what does he discover about himself when he puts out the fire? I want us to think a little bit back to our character design. Remember, he acts out of emotion. So I think Fluffy McCloud is able to be calm himself down from the anger that he was feeling. And because he's calm, he's able to put out the fire and then go through town and finish helping people, right? What else does he help? After he puts out the fire, he fills a pool. What else? He cleans a car. He waters a lawn. I think he actually puts out another fire. I don't know why there's so many fires in this town. So let's think about this. So this says, Fluffy puts out a fire. Oh, I realize this is all backwards for you. Well, you get the idea. He fills a pool. He cleans a car. He waters a lawn. He puts out another fire. So what does this mean? What should the end of our story be? So two things have to happen at the end of any story. The first thing is that somehow they resolve the conflict. They overcome the obstacle. Whatever that obstacle is, they're able to overcome it. If our character is on a journey to meet a friend, and the obstacle is that they're really shy, maybe it's hard for them to make a friend because they're shy. How do they overcome it? Maybe they overcome it because they embrace their shyness and they find another friend who's kind of shy. Maybe they overcome it because they find a way to cope with their shyness and they're able to be more courageous in a certain world. Fluffy McCloud solves this problem by putting out the fire, right? He calms down and he puts out the fire. But that's not the end. So they need to solve the conflict or resolve the conflict. But the second thing that needs to happen is they need to finish their journey. So, Fluffy McCloud, yes, he resolved the conflict of setting the man's house on fire. But he didn't stop there, right? The story didn't feel complete until he finished his journey of helping people all over town. So I'm going to go over this one more time. So in our beginning, we meet our character. They set off on a journey. In the middle, they come across a conflict, an obstacle in the way of their journey. And in the end, they resolve the conflict and they finish their journey. It's so easy to make a story. All you need is 3 things: a beginning, a middle, and an end. So in your assignment, in your handout tonight, I think I give you a paper like this with maybe some dotted lines that you can go ahead and fold yourself and make the beginning, middle, and end of your story. All right, now the very last thing that I want to go over today is something very special. It's called storyboarding. I kind of introduced this at the beginning of class. Storyboarding is a roadmap for animators. It's a series of images that shows us what needs to be animated in order to accomplish the story that we wrote. So, it's kind of difficult to do unless you see some examples. So I'm going to show you a few examples, and then we're going to storyboard a little bit of Fluffy McCloud together. I'm going to share my screen here. Bear with me. All right, so this is a storyboard of the one and only Wallace and Gromit. I'm going to let you all just look at it silently for a little bit. So the first thing I noticed about this storyboard is that it looks like a comic. Kind of looks like a comic strip, right? And it looks like a really funny comic that I would read. Looks like a comic strip. I noticed that there's a lot of little boxes, and in each box, whoops, that's the next one we'll look at, a little sneak peek. In each box, we see a part of the story. I noticed that it goes in a specific order, right? For this, it reads left to right, and then it goes all the way to the left again, and then it goes to the left again, kind of like a book. So now let's look at it a little more closely. So what do we have here? Here we've got, I'm so sorry. I always forget which one is Wallace and which one is Gromit. I think the dog is Gromit. So we see Gromit. He's opened a card. It's playing some music. He kind of looks sad. And then he perks up. We don't know why he perks up yet. But then we see that it's because this breakfast light is dinging. So already in our minds, we're seeing this light is flashing. It's probably making a sound of some sort. And then we have to think, if we were just watching this film, we're thinking, why is this light blinking? But then we see it's because Wallace is pressing a button, right? And then we're back to Gromit, and he pulls a lever. What does that lever do, we wonder? Now we see what it does. Wallace drops down into his trousers and then is ready to eat breakfast. So let's think about why this filmmaker decided to break up these panels the way they did. What do you think? Why would an animator need to know the information that's in each of these panels? So first of all, the animator needs to know this information because they need to know that they have to make a Wallace or a Gromit character. They know that they have to make this card. They know that they have to make this blinking light. right? You can just look at the storyboard and you know exactly what props, what set, what characters you need to make. You also know what expressions those characters need to have. Next week, we're going to learn how to make these characters. But with a storyboard, you already, bam, you have an idea of what needs to go into your film. Something else that is given with the information in this panel is where the camera needs to be. What kind of angle you need to shoot with. Is it going to be like we all learned, where you're looking down? Does it need to be facing up? So this is what you learned. So let's look at the next one. This is Toy Story. And again, let's break it down. Buzz Lightyear goes into this vending machine. Woody follows him. And then Woody's watching as Buzz Lightyear is talking to all these aliens, right? So what do we know? We know that we need to make a bunch of aliens. We need to make a vending machine. We need a close-up of Woody getting into the vending machine. And we also need a far away shot of him running toward the vending machine, right? I have one more to show you. This is from a movie called Paranorman, made by a company called Leica. So this is Norman. He's looking at a building. He goes into the building. All of his friends follow. And then we see what's inside the building. Okay. So I think we're ready. Are you guys ready? Let's do this. So we've got our piece of paper. Once again, we're going to fold it. So we're going to fold it hot dog style. That's what we call it where I'm from. We kind of fold it hot dog style. And then once you've creased it like this, I want you to, again, fold it into thirds. Boop, boop. Mine's a little sideways, but that's okay. I think it'll still work. And look at that. We have all 6 sections. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then once again, go ahead and define all of the creases with a marker. And look at that. It looks just like Wallace and Gromit, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So let's do it. Let's storyboard the very first scene in Fluffy McCloud. And once again, I get to do my very fancy drawing that we all love. So the first thing that happens, we meet Fluffy McCloud, right? He comes into screen. The great thing about storyboarding is the drawing, it can just be a sketch, right? As long as it has all the information we need, we see Fluffy McCloud. That's all the information that we need. I'm gonna write a little note though, because the very first thing that Fluffy McCloud does is he looks down. So I'm gonna write looks down, right? We see Fluffy McCloud, he looks down and then he frowns. And frowns. You could separate this into more panels, right? You could have Fluffy McCloud. This one could be him looking down and frowning. But I'm just gonna write a little note. And then what do we see? We see what he's looking at, right? And what he's looking at. He's looking at a bushel of very sad flowers. It's kind of hard to draw sad flowers, but this is my best interpretation of sad flowers. And then what do we see? We see Fluffy McCloud raining. So Fluffy McCloud comes in, he looks down, he frowns. We see what he's looking at, some flowers, he starts to rain. And then the flowers transform into happy flowers. So again, I think you might need a little note here. I'm going to write turn from sad to happy. And as an animator, when you come across this panel, you'll have to think. You'll have to think, how am I going to make these flowers turn from sad flowers to happy flowers? Remember last week we learned how to transform animations by replacing them? I remember in your handout last week you had how to create or how to animate growth by replacing a triangle with a larger and larger triangle. It'd be the same thing with this, right? We would replace the sad flowers with flowers that are a little bit happier, and then replace those with flowers that are a little bit happier, and then continue until they're big, beautiful ones. All right, and then what happens? Then we see a shot that's way zoomed out where we can see both Fluffy McCloud being happy again and the happy flowers. All right, so we see both of these things. I want you to think too, there was a lot of other things happening in this scene. There were some mountains, there were some trees. So as you're making your storyboards, I want you to think, how much information do I really want in this scene? Do I want to have some of the setting in my panel? Maybe. Okay. And then the last thing that we see is Fluffy exiting the frame. He leaves the scene onto his next adventure. And I think you might have time to storyboard his next adventure as well. So I'm going to draw Fluffy McCloud, and then I'm going to draw an arrow. So it's Fluffy McCloud leaving. And there you go. You just storyboarded your very first scene. You're basically a professional animator now. So very, very quickly, I don't have too much time, but on the back, you could do the next scene, right? Which, surprise, is actually very, very similar to the first scene. We first have Fluffy McCloud. He looks down and he frowns. And then we see what he's looking at. He's looking at a fish without very much water. And then he solves the problem by raining. My clouds are getting a little crazy. And then we see the fish is now happy. And the puddle is filled with water. And then we see the cloud looking happy, Fluffy looking happy, and the fish looking happy. And then the cloud moves on to his next adventure. So that was very quick, but I just wanted to show you all that it's the exact same formula as the very first one. And maybe as you were thinking about your own film, think about this formula of how to use film to show these things, to show these relationships between characters without using any dialogue. Oh, okay. I know that was a lot of work, all stuffed into a very short amount of time. So I'm going to quickly review it and then talk about our assignment for tonight. So first we have character design, right? We learned who is Fluffy McCloud and what does Fluffy McCloud want. Then we go into story writing, where we learn the beginning, the middle, and the end of our story. And we follow these very simple rules where we meet the character, they're set up on a journey, they have an obstacle, they overcome their obstacle, and they finish their journey. Very simple formula. And then the last thing that we do, which is maybe the most fun thing to do, is we draw out our storyboard, which is kind of like a comic, so that we know what we need to make. Oh, okay. So our assignment for tonight, or for this week, I would like you all to go through this process. I want you to think of a character, maybe draw the character out, maybe tell me who is the character and what do they want. And then the most important part is I would like you to use the handout to create a beginning, a middle, and an end to your story, keeping that formula in mind. And then I want you to try your hand at storyboarding. Maybe you're not going to storyboard your whole film, but maybe you could storyboard the first scene. It'll really help you to visualize what you're going to animate. So character design, story writing, and storyboarding. If you could accomplish those things, that would be so amazing. And I know that there is a link on the website that you can upload your work to. Maybe you can take a picture of your storyboards or a picture of your character design and upload it onto the link. That would be really exciting. I would love to watch, or I would love to see all of it. And then it would be so cool if by the end of all of these classes, when you make your film, we can look back to the original storyboarding and compare them, kind of like we did with Wallace and Gromit. All right, everybody. So that is everything from me. I think that was just exactly 40 minutes. So I would love to hear any questions that you have if you want to put them in the Q&A. If you have any questions about animation in general, any questions about the story writing process, any questions at all, I'm going to give you a few minutes. I have a few frequently asked questions that I get a lot, that I'll go ahead and answer. So one question that I often get is, especially from kids, I get, do animators really storyboard everything? And the answer is yes. If you love Wallace and Gromit, I would highly recommend you look up some of their behind the scenes films, because they take you into their process. And it is crazy how much work they do before they even start animating. They have these huge whiteboards with storyboards all across the panels, and they line up the whiteboards back to back. And so they have like 10 whiteboards just for one scene, and that's all they're going to animate that day. And then the next day they do it again. And it's really, really crazy. But I promise you, the more you storyboard, the more you think out all of these little things, the better your animation will be. I'll wait to see if there's any other questions. I have a few other frequently asked questions that I can answer as well, but I'm just going to wait a little bit first. Another question I get a lot is, I don't know how to make this in a form of a question, but we did the character design for one character, right? Our hero character, our protagonist. And often kids ask me, can I do a character design for the other characters? And my answer is yes. 100%. I think that there are some films like Fluffy McCloud that really only have one character, right? We didn't really learn very much about the other characters. They were kind of just there for Fluffy to help. And so in that case, I think it makes sense that we only did a character design for Fluffy. But in your film, you might have a lot of characters. If we think about Wallace and Gromit, we would probably have a character design for Wallace, a character design for Gromit. And then Wallace and Gromit always meet a big enemy, right? So we would also have a character design for that enemy. And if you are thinking about that big question of what does your character want, that question is really important for an antagonist, right? It's really important for the enemy of your film because we need to know what they want so that our protagonist can defeat them. You know, maybe they want to take over the world. Maybe they want to make sweaters out of the sheep. I'm trying to remember what that one episode of Wallace and Gromit was about. But whatever they want, that's important for us to know so that we know how to defeat them. So great. So we went over those two questions. Another frequently asked question I get is about the dialogue and the script writing. And so we didn't go over script writing. We just went over kind of the overarching of what you want your story to be. But you can write a script. You can write some dialogue. I think for animation purposes, having dialogue really helps move the story along. Sometimes there's a narrator, and it is important to write these things out. However, I think that it's possible to make a really, really wonderful film without using any dialogue or narration. And I think that it's a lot easier to do that as well because animating dialogue is something that's really, really difficult. And so oftentimes for kids, I recommend that they make a film without any dialogue, that they just focus on making their story. They focus on having their characters have emotions. You know, we can talk about facial expressions. We can talk about those kinds of things next week. And it's really important to get the story down, to animate the whole story. And then afterwards, after we've animated the story, then we can think back and think, okay, now that we've animated this story, that's incredible. Can we add some sound effects that will make it even better? Could we add some dialogue without their mouths moving that can make it even better? Could we add narration that would make it better? It's just my personal teaching philosophy that adding the dialogue is better to do after we've animated our whole film. And if you stick around, I'll show you how to add dialogue in using our app that we downloaded last week. I'll show you how to add that dialogue in during the very last class, and it's really easy to do. And then I think this is a really good precursor to more advanced kinds of animating. So after you finish this class and you've made your first silent animation, the next class, you can try to write a script first, right? The next film that you can make can be a little more elevated, a little more advanced because you're going to add dialogue. All right. So lastly, I would love to talk about what our next two classes are going to be. This whole series about stop motion animation is 4 classes long. So we learned the basics of stop motion animation. Today we learned story writing. Next week, we are going to learn all about the making process. So we're going to learn how to make sets. We're going to learn how to make puppets, which is our characters. And we're going to learn how to make them in such a way that they can move around, that they can smile, that they can frown. So next class is going to be very fun, not as writing heavy as this class. It's going to be very hands-on. And then in the last class, we're going to kind of learn how to put it all together. We're going to learn a little bit about editing. We're going to learn about sound and music and adding the dialogue element I just talked about. And so if you are interested in completing your stop motion animated film, I recommend sticking around till the very last class, because it's really exciting. Oh, and I have another frequently asked question that I forgot about. I often get the question from kids and from parents kind of about what is the role of an adult in the story writing process. And I think that the role is really, really important, actually. Oftentimes, kids come up with just the most incredible stories. They're so amazing. But maybe they include a car chase. Maybe they include some things that are just really difficult to animate. And so I always think that it's the role of the adult in the room to rein in the ideas. And so I would recommend, as you're going through the story writing character design process, to have in mind, how much time do we have to make this film? Keep in mind, what materials do we have access to? Do we have access to enough materials to make a whole village? Maybe not. Do we have enough materials to make 3 characters? Maybe. So think about the time that you have, the materials that you have. And then lastly, I just really want, we want our students to be successful. We want their finished product to be accomplishable. And so making sure that those goals are appropriate for your child, making sure that they're appropriate for the level of animator that they are, for how much experience they have with filmmaking. And so that's why I showed this Fluffy McCloud video, because it's very simple animation. There's only a few characters. There's no dialogue, right? It's very easy to do, and it's still really effective. So I would recommend using that as kind of a template. And so as you are going through the story writing process with your student, bear all of these things in mind and make sure you are paring it down to something that can be successful. And then again, next film you make can maybe be one level above that. Maybe have one more character, one more element to your story. Also keep in mind that for every second of film, we're taking 12 pictures. So realistically, are you going to be able to make a full-length film? Probably not. Can you make 2 minutes of film? Yes, definitely. See that somebody raised their hand. So I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk, Emma. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, do you have a question?
Yes. First, thank you for this. It's so smooth and easy to follow you. I have a question how many scene and should be the scene in in every part equal have balance
Yeah.
for the
So
number of the scene.
the question is how many scenes are realistic?
Yes, and every part of the story should be I have um, 2 in the beginning, 2 in the middle, and 2 in the end,
Yeah.
or it's maybe not equal for each part.
Oh, I see. Equal for each part.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. So it's really up to you. I think that typically the middle scene is probably the shortest, right? So maybe the middle is 1 scene, the beginning is 2 scenes, the end is 2 scenes. I find with beginning filmmakers, it's pretty difficult to create more than 10 scenes. So I would keep it under 10. I think you can have a really successful film with 3 scenes. So I would recommend anywhere between 3 and 10 scenes. and even setting that parameter to your student, telling your kid, let's stick, make it less than 10 scenes, and that can be really successful. But yeah, as far as equally weighting them, I think if you're going to put preference, I would have more scenes at the beginning and at the end. And that conflict scene maybe only has to be 1 or 2 scenes. It doesn't have to be very long. If you think about Fluffy McCloud, that conflict scene was just one, right? It was just Fluffy lighting the house on fire. It was a little bit shorter than the beginning and the end. Does that answer your question?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Iman. Is there another raised hand? No, okay. Great, so that was a really great question. Thank you so much for asking that. I think that is actually a really useful tool in helping rein in your kids' ideas, is giving them a set amount of scenes, saying for the beginning, we can have 2 scenes. What do you want those scenes to be? I would also recommend, and we'll talk a little bit about this next week, sticking to a set amount of locations, right? We are only going to build 2 sets. One of these sets will be a forest, one will be a castle, something like that. And just like really understanding, you as a parent, how much space do you have to put all of these sets? How much space do you have to put all of these puppets? And so I would also recommend, when you're thinking about the story writing, think about how many sets are you actually going to make. Fluffy McCloud took place in a few places, right? We had that forest at the beginning with the flowers, and then we had the town. And in the town, there were a few different scenes, but I have a feeling they only made 2 sets for that film. And I'm trying to think of another good example. I guess the film that we watched last week, if you were there with us, we watched a Pez film called Western Spaghetti, and it all took place in a kitchen. Pretty much every set, there was 1 set on the stove and then 1 set on the counter. And I think at the end they had a table that they put the spaghetti on. But anyways, keep that in mind and think to yourself, how much space do we have in our home for sets, and limit it to that many sets or that many locations. But also, I do want to know in these last couple of minutes that this is all flexible, right? You can write your story, and then once you learn how to make the puppets and the sets, you can realize the story is way too ambitious. We're not going to be able to accomplish it. Or maybe you even learn, whoa, we can do so much more. And so know that it's flexible, and some of the questions that maybe we can answer next class can be more specific to the film you're working on. And you and I can, we can brainstorm a little bit more individually about, like, this is the idea that we had for our film, but now I'm realizing we won't be able to do this set. What's another option? And we can do some of that brainstorming work. And so it's important to have, of course, the character design and the storyboard and everything, that all the work that you're going to do this week for your film, but just know that there are other options, and we can be a little bit flexible with it. I'm getting another question. Can I send the link of the movie? I can. Anastasia, I don't know if you have the link handy to put in the chat box.
Yes, we will send the link to all participants.
Okay, great. Awesome. So you will all be able to see it and watch it. I would recommend, watching the film a few times with your student, and maybe going through the same process if your kid wasn't here during this talk. It doesn't have to be as in-depth, but, talking a little bit about, who is Fluffy McCloud? What does he want? Also, I noticed that Anastasia just put in this link. This is the link for, correct me if I'm wrong, Anastasia, this is the link for uploading your work. And so again, if you create some amazing storyboards and scripts with your kids, I would love for you to take a picture and send it in to us so we can see it. And then I believe all of the work that we do during these webinars will be submitted to a big showcase of all of kids' work during the pandemic, which is really exciting that your kids' work could be out there and we're making something beautiful out of such a difficult time for all of us. All right, so I think that's it from me. Those were all of my frequently asked questions. Thank you so much, Aman, for your extra question. But yeah, that's everything from me. And thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope that you learned a lot. I hope that you're inspired to write your own stories with your students. And yeah, I'm excited to continue on this journey with you all and make some amazing films. I'm gonna let you go.